Hello, my name is Josephine Jones and I direct programs in the Center for the Book for Colorado Humanities. Welcome to the 2020 Colorado Book Awards finalist readings. Everything we do at Colorado Humanities is a team effort, and I would particularly like to thank Chris Goff for taking the lead on moving these readings online, and Tanya Albright, who's co-hosting here for technical assistance, as well as our board of directors and an army of volunteers who selected the finalist books. I would like to let everyone know how we hope this will go. This is our first one and we beg your patience. We've muted everyone's microphones, we thought, and we are going to try and keep it that way so that we can all hear better. If you have a question, please type it into the chat feature in Zoom, preferred, or if you're watching Facebook Live, type it in there. I'll keep an eye on it and move it to Zoom so the presenters can see it. Although we are online and at home this year instead of snug in the book bar with a treat and a beverage, we can still purchase books through the Book Bar's website. Book Bars are co-hosts for the readings and will gladly mail them. This is a great way to support local businesses. Our sponsors also continue their support. Denver-based Outskirts Press, a longtime sponsor of the Colorado Center for the Book, stands ready to help authors develop, publish, and market their books. Colorado Sun, the online newspaper, is also providing funding and is featuring weekly Sunlit excerpts and interviews from many of our Colorado authors' books. We want to thank them, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and all of you for being here. Let's all use CBA 2020 as hashtag, is also hashtag CO Humanities at home right now, as we post about our experiences with the finalists and their work. We are delighted to welcome Denise Vega as our MC today. An award-winning author of 7 books for kids from toddler to teen, Denise is a young adult fiction mentor for the Regis University MFA in Creative Writing program, an instructor for Lighthouse Writers Workshop, and 3-time Colorado Book Award winner. Please welcome Denise Vega.
It's just a delight to be here. I am so pleased to introduce 6 talented writers whose books have been named by Colorado Book Award selectors as the finalists in the juvenile literature and the young adult literature categories. We'll start with juvenile literature and move on to the young adult literature category. I will introduce each of the authors and there will be a short Q&A after they've read. We will also have another chance for questions at the end of all of the readings. So let's get started with Lija Fisher, who will read from her juvenile literature novel, The Cryptid Keeper. Lija has performed on stages across New York, California, Florida, Colorado, and Alaska. In 2017, she was the writer in residence with Aspen Words. Prior to becoming an author, she trained for a while, a very short while, she says, to be a Hollywood stunt person. Lija?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. So my book that I'll be reading from is The Cryptid Keeper, and it is the sequel to my debut novel, which was The Cryptid Catcher. And these are humorous adventure novels for 8 to 12-year-olds about the world of cryptozoology, which is the study of legendary animals that might be real, like Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster. And the portion that I'm going to read for you is where the main character is traveling the world looking for a very special cryptid. And he comes across something called the Quester's Cave, where there is information in there about this very special cryptid that he is searching for. And he is reading and learning about this cryptid, and he is learning more than he bargains for. And here we go. This is from The Cryptid Keeper. Clivo forced himself to close the book and reached for another, this one with a terrifying image of a sinewy creature flying through the air on massive wings, the aswang. Clivo opened it and the spine cracked as if it hadn't been touched in years, as if another questers knew better than to even entertain the idea of searching for such a creature. The parchment was old and faded, but the ink looked fresh, as if the pages had never been exposed to sunlight. Whereas the other book spent a lot of time explaining the history and stories of local legends with great exuberance, the pages of this book were blank, save for a few in the middle. There was hardly any information at all, and what there was seemed to be restrained. The book only mentioned how the Aswang shape-shifted at the full moon, how it flew higher than the clouds and was impossible to catch, and how it changed islands every 20 years so nobody would notice that it ever aged. That was some new information to Clivo. He could now narrow his search to people who had moved to the island in the last 20 years, though how he figured that out was beyond him. He turned another page and sucked in his breath as he stared at the illustration of a devil-faced creature. Underneath was an eloquently scrolled caption. The Aswang feeds on the living. The Aswang thrives on death. If you find it, destroy it. Demons have no place wandering the earth. Clivo closed the book and put it delicately back on its cloth, as if just reading the words could somehow anger the Aswang. But nothing could get the image of the distorted face with sharp fangs and black eyes out of his head. Clivo walked back to town, grateful for the sunshine on his face. The chill of the church's tomb, combined with the warning from the book, had given him a massive case of the heebie-jeebies. If you find it, destroy it. His job was to protect the cryptids, not destroy them. But did that hold true for the cryptid that might just be pure evil and the immortal? He shook his head, realizing that before deciding what to do with the Aswang, he actually had to catch the thing first. And that is just a little portion from The Cryptid Keeper. And if anybody would like to ask me any questions, you can type them down at the bottom of the screen in chat. And I think I can see it then on my screen. I have a little thing that says Zoom group chat. So I assume that if someone types something, I can read it. So feel free to ask away. And you can also ask questions about the world of cryptozoology, which is, again, a science or a pseudoscience for people actually searching for these animals, hidden animals that might be real. And we actually have found some cryptids. Oh, I have a question. How did you do research for this book? Very good question. The first thing I did was I Googled, of course, a lot of what cryptids were. But then I got a lot of information actually from a very world-renowned cryptozoologist by the name of Loren Coleman. And he has been in the field searching for cryptids for over 40 years. And he is the founder of the International Cryptozoology Museum in Portland, Maine. And he actually read my book and said that he would not sign off on it because it was factually incorrect in some areas. And I said, how can it be factually incorrect if these are animals we have not found? But he taught me that even these legends have history, and even these legends have research done with them, and that I couldn't just make up whatever I wanted, that I actually had to be true to these stories of these cryptids, and there are thousands of them that live all over the world. Any other questions? While you're thinking about your question, I will tell you some fun cryptid facts. Bigfoot has been found in every state in America except one, and that is Hawaii, because apparently Bigfoot can't swim and nobody will let him on an airplane. But I have a question here. Is the book's focus only on one cryptid? Not at all. There are thousands of cryptids all over the world, and in each of my books, I explore many different cryptids because the main character, his task is to travel the world to find the one very special cryptid that can actually destroy humanity if the bad guys find it. Yes. Any other questions? I'll wait just another moment to see if someone has a question, and now I'll tell you more cryptid information is that we actually have found cryptids. People think that cryptids are these fantastical animals that live in our imagination, but there are animals that people claim they have seen, but they were not yet discovered. And so they were just part of stories and legends, but they eventually were discovered, and they were then no longer legend, they were real. And some of those animals are the okapi, is the very first cryptid that was found. And someone's saying the colossal squid. I think that means that that might be a cryptid that was found. The okapi was found in Africa, and it is half zebra, half giraffe. And also the platypus, believe it or not, was a cryptid. People kept claiming that there was an animal that had a duck bill and a beaver tail. And when one was first discovered, scientists actually believed that, that it was an animal sewn together as a joke. So scientists thought the platypus was a joke before they actually proved that it was real. Oh, another question here. Does Clivo travel with a friend or by himself? He mainly travels the world by himself. However, he does find a group of kids who call themselves the Myth Blasters, and it is their job to stay in their headquarters and actually research where to find these cryptids. So he does have a team with him, but he kind of travels the world by himself, because it would probably draw a lot of attention if a group of 13-year-olds were traveling.
Still signing.
Oh, thank you, Leah. That was amazing.
Thank you so much, everybody.
And if people have more questions about cryptids, you can wait till the end, and we'd love to get more. That's amazing. Our next reader is Laura Resau, reading from her juvenile literature novel, Tree of Dreams. An award-winning author of 9 highly acclaimed young adult and children's novels set in Latin America and Europe, her books are inspired by her time abroad as a cultural anthropologist, ESL teacher, and student. She lives with her family in Fort Collins, Colorado. Laura?
Thank you so much, Denise. Thank you to all the folks at Colorado Humanities for this honor and for putting so much work into putting this event together. And congratulations to the other finalists. We have a really wonderful, supportive writing community in Colorado, and I feel so lucky to be part of it. So thank you. So I'm going to be reading a little bit of Tree of Dreams, and I'm also going to be telling you, kind of setting up the scene and telling you a little bit about the book first, and then, you know, again, you can write in the chat area if you have any questions afterwards. Okay, so the book is about a 13-year-old girl named Coco. She runs a chocolate shop with her mom in a mountain town in Colorado called Heartbeat Springs. It's fictional. And she's afraid that the chocolate shop is going to have to be shut down for business. Around that time, she starts getting mysterious dreams about a mystical ceiba or kapok tree. And the tree promises her a treasure within its roots if she can find it. She ends up finding a way to get to the remote Amazon rainforest in search of this tree. She believes that if she can find the treasure, she might be able to save her family's chocolate shop from closing. So she takes this trip with her mom, her former best friend and his mom, and the mysterious grandfatherly neighbor that they have. So they go to the remote Amazon rainforest, but once Coco gets there, she ends up becoming friends with a girl, Isa, who's about her age and is from the Guarani community that's running a cacao cooperative where they're visiting. And she starts to realize that Isa's community and her rainforest home is in danger of destruction from logging operations and oil drilling operations. And so as Coco makes more connections with nature and with people, she ends up kind of questioning her priorities and joining forces with the Guarani community and with her friends to try and save their rainforest and really protect what matters most. So I'm going to read you the part where she's flying into the remote Amazon rainforest of Ecuador in a teeny tiny plane with her companions. From above, the Amazon rainforest looks like broccoli, an endless sea of broccoli. 10 minutes into the flight, in all directions are mounds of green florets, each one a treetop. That's the only way I can wrap my head around how gigantic this place is, comparing it to a side dish on a dinner plate. Rivers snake through, ribbons of gold lacing through all that green. Here and there is a straight brown line, a road, and brown square clearings and rectangles of gray buildings. Petroleros, the pilot shouts over his shoulder, pointing with his chin. Oil drillers. Other than the petroleros, there's just this broccoli sea beneath us. And the farther in we fly, these naked patches are fewer and farther between. The pilot is burly and muscled, his chest nearly bursting through his buttoned shirt. Sweat stains the fabric under his arms, but he smells only like cologne. In a loud, rough voice, he explains that first the logging companies come and chop down strips of trees to form muddy dirt roads. They make way for the petroleros to set up oil wells and drilling operations. He shakes his head, taps his large fingers on the steering device. 10 years ago, this was solid jungle, amigos. I can't see his eyes behind the mirrored lenses, but there's something sad in his voice, in the shrug of his shoulder. We fly for another half hour over mounds of thick, rich green. I could never get tired of so much green. I'm gulping it down like a cool glass of water on a hot day. It's as if my soul sighs between swigs. Okay, so that's what I have for you, and I would love to hear any questions you have. And again, you can go ahead and write them in the chat section. And I can talk a little bit while we're waiting. I can talk a little bit about my inspiration for the book. So the two big elements of inspiration were chocolate and the Amazon rainforest. And I had the luck of being able to do a lot of research in both areas. So as far as the, I see the question about Ecuador, and I'll get to that in just a second. Yeah, so around the time I was writing this book, an amazing bean to bar chocolate shop called Nuance opened a few blocks from my house. So I was looking for an excuse to make that a bigger part of my life, and I ended up doing a lot of research in the chocolate shop, doing a lot of tastings, visiting their factory, really kind of filling my life with chocolate. So it was fun to include that element in the book. And then I had spent a lot of time in Ecuador writing 2 previous books. And then I decided I was more in the Andes Mountains, and I had always been curious about the Amazon rainforest, the eastern section of Ecuador. So this book was kind of an opportunity for me to learn more about the indigenous cultures and communities in the Amazon rainforest. Okay, so one question is, was that your impression of Ecuador, the green? So yes, it absolutely was. And I think just flying over the rainforest was an absolutely breathtaking experience and life-changing. And I think it really made me understand the vastness of it. And it also, it was a very intense experience of green. But then when you see the oil drilling operations, blocked off in the midst of that lush, gorgeous, vast forest, it also kind of brings home to you the destruction that's happening. Okay, another one. I like the way you've got Spanish in the book. Thank you. Yeah, I became fluent in Spanish when I lived in Oaxaca, Mexico, as an English teacher. And then I ended up doing my master's research there in anthropology. And then I just ended up doing a lot of work with immigrants and refugees. And so I get to practice my Spanish pretty regularly. So I really feel like knowing Spanish really enables me to make kind of stronger connections with people in the countries I visit. So I was able to just really create a pretty strong connection with my guide, who was kind of bringing me through the rainforest, telling me about his childhood, his community's beliefs, and all of their interesting cultural practices. And so, yeah, it just seemed natural to incorporate Spanish in the book, and then even a little bit of Guarani, which is the indigenous language there. Okay, let me look at another question here. Let's see, hold on. Okay, did you see destruction from palm plantations as well? That's a great question. In the particular area where I was, the big dangers were more logging, mineral extraction, and oil drilling. So there wasn't as much. I know in other parts of the Amazon, you know, there are issues with palm plantations or cattle grazing, and other kinds of agriculture and ranching. But in this particular area of Ecuador, it's really more the mineral and oil extraction. Do you use any magical realism in your work, as many Latin American writers do? I do use magical realism, and in my books, including this one, it kind of is inspired by beliefs of the culture in the book. So I was really interested talking to my guide, Pegonka, and the other people that I met during my research trip about how dreams have special significance. And every morning they start out the day by sharing their dreams and understanding that dreams have significance and they need to be shared in order to be acted on. And so that's kind of also one of the plots and themes in my book, is this idea of dreams having meaning and the importance of sharing your dreams. And so that's kind of one of many elements in the book that's kind of drawn from Guarani cultural beliefs and kind of, you know, would be probably considered magical in our society.
Perfect. Oh, that's so fabulous, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise.
Love it. So our last reader in the juvenile literature category is David Heska Wanbli Weiden, reading from his work, Spotted Tail. An enrolled member of the Sikangu Lakota Nation, Weiden's upcoming novel, Winter Counts, has been chosen as one of 2020's most anticipated books by Library Journal. He's published in magazines, is the fiction editor for Anomaly, a journal of international literature and arts, and teaches writing at the Lighthouse Writers Workshop in Denver. David?
Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Right, okay, excellent. Well, thank you, it's my honor. I'll start off by saying I'm Petu Washte, Amachiapi David Heska Wanbli Weiden. Good day, my name is David Heska Wanbli Weiden. I'm from Denver, Colorado. My nation is the Sikangu Lakota Nation, which is also known as the Rosebud Sioux Tribe, and it is located in South Dakota. And I normally would start by acknowledging the land that we're on, but how do we acknowledge when we're all in different places? So I'll just say, wherever you're listening to, we acknowledge the indigenous people of original owners of the land upon which we stand, wherever you are. So my thanks as well to the Colorado Book Awards. I'm wonderfully honored to be here today, and Colorado Humanities. It's just my great honor to be here. So my book is Spotted Tail. It is a biography of Chief Spotted Tail, who was the great leader of my nation. I should also point out, this is Winter Counts, which is coming out in August from Echo HarperCollins. It is not a children's book, okay? It is apparently one of the first Native American thrillers. And so that will be coming out. But again, please do not give that book to your children. What I'm gonna read from today, again, is Spotted Tail. It is from Raycraft Books. It is available now. Why did I write this book? I wrote it because as an American Indian person, there are very few multicultural books. I'm the proud father of two boys, David and Sasha, and there are not enough books about our people. When my boys were growing up, I read, there are some wonderful books by S.D. Nelson and others, books on Spotted Tail, books on Geronimo, a book on Crazy Horse, but there had never been one on the great leader of our nation, the Rosebud Sioux Tribe. And I felt strongly that someone needed to write this. Now, I do have an MFA. I'm trained, though, in adult fiction, so I went back to the drawing board and I started studying how to write children's literature. And it took me a long time to where I felt that I knew what I was doing. I'm still not completely sure that I know what I'm doing there, but I am deeply honored to put together a middle grade book. It is the first one on spotted tail, and I'm just going to read a very short passage. So again, this is a middle grade biography of spotted tail. In our language, it is pronounced Sinte Gleshka. And after the very short reading, I'm happy to explain a little bit more about spotted tail and the Rosebud Sioux tribe. But let me read a little bit. This is the very first chapter, just 3 short pages from Spotted Tail. The buffalo herd raced across the plains, kicking up clouds of dust and soil. There were hundreds of them, all running at full speed away from the hunters. The sound of their hooves echoed like giants stomping across the land. Young Spotted Tail looked over at his father, who sat atop his favorite horse. This was the first time that Spotted Tail had been allowed to join the hundreds of hunters, and he wanted to make sure that he didn't make any mistakes. His father waved to him, telling him to join the group of riders behind the buffalo. The best horseman rode in the middle of the herd, guiding them to the buffalo jump, which was a steep cliff where most of the animals would fall to their death. Then the tribe would gather at the bottom of the canyon to collect all the dead bison to use for food, clothing, and tools. The buffalo ran harder and harder, trying to escape from the hunters, but they didn't see the cliff right ahead. Spotted Tail watched the hunters pull back the horses and the bison race off the cliff. It was almost as if they could fly. Spotted Tail's people would now have the food that they needed for the long winter. Spotted Tail hoped that he would be allowed to join in the next buffalo hunt, proudly riding next to his father and his friends. Thank you so much for listening to just a very short bit of Spotted Tail. I am happy now to take some questions. By now, you know, if you're watching in, that you should use the chat function, and happy to talk a little bit. Let me speak a little bit. While I'm waiting for someone to come in, I'll talk a little bit. This book has a really unique art style, and the art style is a mixture of photography and visual art. Now, it is illustrated by the 2 artists, Jim Yellowhawk and Pat Kinsella. So we did get a native artist to work on the illustrations here, and it uses a wonderful a hybrid of photography and visual art. Let me see if I can get some of the really striking ones. This is a wonderful page right here. And there are so many more. So I just want to point out here that the book is not just a collection of the text and the biography that I wrote of Spotted Tail, but it has some really wonderful art. Now, not just the photography art hybrid, but it also uses something called ledger art. Ledger art is a unique native art form where artists will draw upon old ledgers from the 1800s. This style developed when buffalo hides became tough to get in the late 1800s, so native artists took whatever paper they could find that had been thrown away. And so now there is a unique native art form called ledger art. So I'm just so deeply proud, and I want to honor my illustrators, Jim Yellowhawk and Pat Kinsella, because I really think that they added so much to this book. So anyway, thank you so much. All right, so the art is amazing. Was I able to listen to oral history in my research? And the answer to that is yes. The Rosebud Indian Reservation is in South Dakota. It's about 5 hours drive from Denver. And so I was able to use some of the recollections of me growing up. I relied upon, there's a biography written in the 1960s by a gentleman called George Hyde. I relied upon that. You know, I relied upon so many things. So I see some other ones. Do I have links, additional resources for Native info that is kid appropriate? Not in this book, but I would love to point you in the direction of the wonderful Native children's author, Cynthia Lytick Smith. She has a blog called Sensations. Now, just 2 days ago, they did an interview with me, and I talked much more about spotted tail, please go to the blog Sensations. And Cynthia Leitig-Smith also just put up yesterday or 2 days ago a wonderful collection of native children's books going all the way from picture books all the way to YA. So if you want to gain some indigenous books for your children, whether you're a teacher or a parent, please go to Cynthia Leitig-Smith's blog Sensations, where you will find a wonderful list of books. Next, the question is, does the book take Spotted Tail from youth to when he led the Lakota tribe? The answer to this is yes. This is a full biography, age appropriate, of Spotted Tail, all the way from his youth to his death. He was shot by another Lakota person called Crow Dog. And so it takes him from birth to death. And then at the end of the book, I really am proud of this. I included an appendix, and the appendix has a short history of the Lakota people that is age appropriate. And then I also included some customs that non-Indigenous people may not know about. We have a custom called the giveaway. We have a custom called spirit names. So Native people can get a spirit name. It is not a practice for non-Native people. It's only for Native people for us to get a spirit name. So any teachers that are watching, please do not in class give your kids a spirit name, okay? It is a sacred tradition to us. And again, I'll let that stand on its own there. The next question, did I learn something new about my tribe or nation while researching this book? I didn't learn a lot that was new, but what I learned is how deeply important Sinte Gleshka, who is what we call him in Lakota, how deeply important he is to my people and to our identity. We don't have as many famous Native leaders like a Sitting Bull or Geronimo or Crazy Horse. He's our great leader. And I'm just so deeply proud that Sicangu youth will be able to have their own children's book and take pride in the great leader. So Spotted Tail did a lot of things that I think it's really important to acknowledge. He was one of the first Native leaders to emphasize education. He said the way that Native youth can get ahead is by education, which I wholeheartedly agree with. I'm a professor of Native American Studies at Metro State University. So anyway, so what I learned is just how deeply important he is to our people. And then did I use any Rosebud vocabulary? Yes, there are a handful of Lakota words in the book, but I always try to explain what they mean. Now, in this book, which again is not for children, there are a lot of Lakota words and sometimes Lakota bad words. So this is where I got to really indulge my Lakota vocabulary, and I am not a fluent speaker by any stretch. And then I'm probably running out of time here. I don't want to take anything away from my wonderful co-nominees here. Last one, I guess. How was your experience getting to publication with this book? Being a Native American writer, a group that has historically faced many barriers in publishing. That is a wonderful question. How was it for me to be published finally? I have to say, I think things are changing. I know that American Indians have had a tough time getting published. I have had really just a wonderfully welcoming time. Raycraft Books, if you're not aware of this, it's a new children's book imprint. They only publish underrepresented authors, and they signed me right away. HarperCollins has been great with this book. So honestly, I think things are changing. I believe we have a long way to go, let me be clear, but I think that multicultural, inclusive voices are getting a seat at the table. So I'm so thrilled about that. So let me end it up here just by giving my thanks to everyone and just saying that it's been wonderful to take part. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, David. That was wonderful. And the book looks amazing. I keep thinking to myself, I'm so glad I didn't have to vote. I don't know how you make a choice here. They're all amazing. So thank you. And we're moving on now to finalists in the young adult literature category. We'll start with Jim and Stephanie Kroepfl. They're a husband and wife team who write YA novels and stories of mystery and adventure from their Colorado Rocky Mountain cabin. Lucky them. Their stories and articles have been published in literary journals in the US and England. Jim and Stephanie are world travelers who seek out crop circles, obscure historical sites, and mysterious ruins. Merged, is their debut novel. Jim and Stephanie.
Hello, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you, everyone. And I can't wait to read all of those books. They sound wonderful.
And we're just so honored to be part of this wonderful group. This is our book, Merged, and it is a young adult science fiction. We wrote it together, which that's usually one of the first questions people ask us is how on earth do you do that and stay married? And so we'll talk about that probably a little bit later. But Merged, I'll just give you a little overview. The pitch is, isn't it terrible when someone goes through their entire life and they accumulate knowledge and then they die and all that knowledge dies? And it's more tragic when someone is trying to cure cancer or find the answer to renewable energy. All that knowledge dies. Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could take the minds of these dying geniuses and implant it into 16-year-old minds with the same proclivity so they could carry on with their work and their dreams? What could go wrong? So that's what the story's about. It's a two-point of view story. There's Lake, who is 16 years old, and she is a chemistry prodigy. And her goal is to cure Alzheimer's because her beloved grandmother is suffering from the disease. The other point of view character is Orphan, who is a street artist in New York City, and he lives in an orphanage run by Sister Moses the Black, who he calls Sister Mo. And his dream is to one day see his artwork in galleries and museums. And so Jim is going to read a passage that, to set it up, Menon suits arrive at the orphanage, and they say they're from the Darwin Corporation, and they want to adopt Orphan. And they want to put him through a program where he is going to be mentored by a master painter. And Orphan decides he wants to do this because in his mind, this is his golden ticket. And now Jim's going to read the passage.
Yeah. So this is Orphan showing up at the Institute, which is beautiful and stately on the outside, and maybe not so much on the inside. Never been out of the city before. The tallest buildings in sight are silos. Past endless rows of all shades of green and fields dotted with huge black cows. Real cows. Then woods with more trees than I've ever seen. There's no concrete anywhere. Even the sky is the wrong color. Robin's egg blue instead of grime gray. After a few hours, we turn onto an unmarked road and pull up to a massive 3-story brick building that's being devoured by a tangle of ivy. This can't be my new home. We're here, Mr. Blue says. I get out of the car and can't stop gawking. It's got to be 10 times bigger than St. Catherine's. I don't know what I did to deserve this, but my guardian angel must have been working overtime. Welcome to your new home. When we enter my new super amazing home, I'm greeted by wood-paneled walls, a black and white checkered marble floor, and a crystal chandelier overhead. There's even a real suit of armor standing guard in the corner. No such thing as a free lunch, I hear in my head in a Jamaican accent. It's not free. I had to leave everyone and everything I know to be here. A ripple of unease rolls through me, which I shrug off. Sometimes good things do happen to good people, and I am a good person. When you're raised by Sister Mo, there is no alternative. I'll bring you to your temporary room. Mr. Blue heads toward the wooden doors on the far wall. What's on the other side? An indoor pool with a water slide? He swipes a key card in front of a small black panel. The door slides into the wall. I pass through the opening with anticipation, then my feet freeze in place. I'm faced with a long, white hallway lined with closed, white doors under a brightly lit, white ceiling. It even smells like a hospital. Sweat pours from my pits, and my tongue suddenly gets stuck to the roof of my mouth. Mr. Blue heads to an elevator leading to who knows where. He turns. You need to come with me. I don't think so. I know this may be a little overwhelming, but it will all be explained soon. I look back at the front doors, picturing the hours of nature we drove past. I could run, but to where? We're in the middle of nowhere, Mr. Blue says, as if reading my mind. Come with me. There's nothing to fear. My pounding heart disagrees. I hear Sister Mo's voice in my head reciting, Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, I shall fear no evil, for the power of my Lord will eviscerate any demon, duppy, or dirtbag in this beautiful world. I reluctantly follow Mr. Blue into the elevator. He pushes the button with -1 on it. The floor drops beneath my feet. We're going down, down. My stomach plunges faster than the elevator. The laboratories and candidates' quarters are on the lower level, he explains, as if it were all perfectly normal. Laboratories? I study Mr. Blue out of the corner of my eye, suddenly wondering if he actually represents an underground organ harvesting operation. Orphan, I know this may not be what you were expecting, but we only have your best interest in mind. We're giving you the opportunity to enhance your life. Who's we? We're the good guys. So that's when Orphan arrives at the what they call the Flem, and it's this building that was once the Fleming Academy, an old boarding school in upstate New York. And that was really fun to research. I didn't know, but you can go on the internet and there's all of these beautiful old school buildings that have been abandoned that you can buy if you want and become like George Harrison.
So while people are going to be answering questions, I'll answer the question that we normally are asked is, how do we write together? And so what it took a long time to figure it out where we weren't on top of each other. You know, I think in the movies, they always show the collaborators side by side on their keyboards and they're like just ideas are pouring out. And what we learned is when you're writing, especially your first draft, you have to let one person or the other do it because you can't be editing each other or even yourself while you're in that creative mode. And so we have a plotting board that it's literally a big cork board with cards on it that we really plot out the novel ahead of time because we kind of divide and conquer the first draft and we have to be on the same page where we're going.
And even if you worked by yourself, that's a good idea because our first novel, we probably wrote 3, 4, or 5 times over again. And if you know where you're going, you don't have to do that.
And so then once we have the first draft, we're lucky enough to live in the Rocky Mountains around a lot of lakes. So we walk around the lake with our dog and kind of plot out, okay, we're in this spot here. How are we going to get them out of this situation? Or I think this character's a little flat. What do we need to do to make the person more interesting? And so that's where we do a lot of our brainstorming. And then we get to the point in editing process, we're just writing on top of each other's work over and over again to the point where I turn to Jim, I'm like, oh, that was a really good sentence. And he's like, I thought you wrote that one. So
yeah, we get to the point we don't know who wrote what. Here's a question. Merge is set in the future. How far from now?
Mm-hmm.
And truth be told, not that far. Since we wrote the book, we're seeing things on 60 Minutes and reading about things that seem like Merge is just right around the corner, where you could actually take someone's pathways of consciousness and put them into a brain or at least a computer.
In our mind, when we started it, 2.5 years ago, it was probably 20 years in the future. I bet we're closer to 10 now.
If that?
Yeah.
So, have you ever had creative disagreements, and how do you work those out? Well, we do have creative disagreements, and they're more often about language and flow and voice, as opposed to the story. We're usually able to figure out the story and the character's motivation and things like that, and what we want to tell, what we want to say through the book. But then we get to, he wouldn't say it that way, or she wouldn't say it that way, and those are our big disagreements. And walking around the lake helps when you get away from the computer so you can communicate about it without putting it down at that instant.
I think the thing that people do disagree about is, you just destroyed my beautiful prose that I spent an hour writing. And, after, as long as we've been doing it, we're like, there's no ego left. Just do what you need to do to it. And I'll just cry over my little dud baby in a while.
you research for this book? Oh, wonderful things. Orphan is an artist, so we had to research art. We actually had a neighbor. She worked in an art gallery her whole career, and she could recreate any painting. I would look through an art book and say, hey, I really like this. And it could be a 200-year-old painting or a Cézanne or something. A week later, she would have it done exactly like it was. And so Orphan had the same ability, but he would do that on alley walls in New York.
So we did a lot of research, and in fact, like David's book, in the back of our book, we have 2 sections. One is all about the artwork that we refer to, and we kind of give a synopsis of, you know, the painter and where you can find it and that type of stuff. And then the other section is a bunch of scientific information, because Lake is very scientific oriented. And so the things she refers to, we describe in this book. And a couple of our friends who know us well are like, we know neither of you have any science background whatsoever. And I don't even know if you ever took a science class stuff. How on earth did you write something so scientific? And we literally would just get on the internet. I mean, we're reading medical journals, you know, or you can, like, every once in a while grab a phrase here or there, because a lot of it's about brain research. And so how do you dissect brains and that kind of stuff? It's the amazingness of the internet.
And how cool octopuses are. They play a role in the scientific research in the book. And they're one of the coolest things on Earth. So that was fun to look into.
They are actually the only ones that don't have iron-based blood. And they have, none of their genes follow any other animal in the water or on Earth. So there is a belief that they are aliens. So.
Wow. Thanks, Jim and Stephanie. And I saw a few more questions come in, and hopefully we can grab those at the end. That would be amazing, because that was fascinating. My mind is churning with everything that you've done and what you're writing about. So thanks so much.
Thank you, everybody.
So we have our last reader this late afternoon, excuse me, is Sandhya Menon, who will read from her young adult literature novel, There's Something About Sweetie. The New York Times best-selling author of several novels with lots of kissing, girl power, and swoony boys, Menon's books have been featured in several cool places, including The Today Show, Cosmopolitan, Teen Vogue, NPR, 17, Entertainment Weekly, and BuzzFeed. Her first novel, When Dimple Met Rishi, won the 2018 Colorado Book Award for Young Adult Literature. Sandhya, you're up.
Hi, everyone, and thank you to Colorado Humanities for having me, and to all the other finalists for giving me even more books to add to my TBR pile. I'm very excited, because what else are we going to do in this quarantine? I'm going to read a quick excerpt from There's Something About Sweetie, which is about a confident, self-proclaimed fat athlete and a player jock who has completely sworn off girls decide to go on 4 dates to prove something to themselves. They are not interested in dating or falling in love, but of course, in the course of the 4 dates, they do end up falling for each other. It's a body positive rom-com with a fat girl who's an athlete playing the lead, which was really important for me to show the representation of that in YA. I don't think you can have enough of that. So the excerpt I'm reading today is part of the meet cute between Sweetie and Ashish. Basically what happens is Sweetie, who is the fat athlete, struggles with a mom who's convinced that if she just lost the weight, her life would be so much better and more enriching. And Sweetie completely disagrees with this. She is really confident and happy with how she is. She's very successful at what she does. And then she overhears her mother speaking to Ashish's mother about how Sweetie and Ashish are mismatched because Sweetie is fat and Ashish is not. So Sweetie decides to take matters into her own hands. She texts Ashish and asks him to meet her at her high school track. because she intends to challenge him to a race. And she has motivations and reasons for doing this. She's trying to prove a point. And so we're going to peek in on them as they kind of finish up this race, and let's see how that goes. Ashish took in a few different things about Sweetie as they raced. The way her legs ate up the track easily, her arms were bent loosely by her sides, her breathing was perfectly paced, her gorgeous high ponytail swung and bounced. She was power, she was grace, she was beauty. She was totally kicking his ass. Ashish rallied and made a gallant effort, but he could see there was no point. There was no way he could beat her now. Winning was a huge part of his identity. He was unapologetically competitive. But even so, watching her mercilessly crush him on the track didn't hurt his ego at all. Weirdly enough, as he closed in on the finish line, he was smiling. Sweetie was already there, smiling too, hands on her hips. Tendrils of hair were plastered across her sweaty forehead and neck. Little drops of sweat beaded along the bridge of her delicate nose. Ashish found this detail almost painfully cute, and he had to rearrange his facial features to look chagrined. "Oh man," he said, "what, did you pop caffeine pills with a Red Bull chaser for breakfast?" She laughed. "Nope, I just wanted to show you." "Show me what?" He remembered how she had said she wanted to get something out of the way and frowned at her as sweat dripped into his eyes. She cocked her head. "I wanted to show you I'm not lazy, unhealthy, or any of the myriad other things people tend to assume. And I'm not someone who's only on the track team because her parents know someone important. I'm really good." Ashish nodded, sensing she wasn't done yet. "And before you ask, I can run because I practice. My weight has nothing to do with my overall health. I kick pretty much everyone's butts at Piedmont, guys and girls alike." "I can totally believe that," Ashish said seriously. "Are you going to run in college?" "That's the plan," she said, looking at him funny. "Awesome. I'm going to play ball in college." Sweetie nodded, still with that funny look on her face. Finally, she said, "Do you have any questions for me about my weight and track?" Ashish thought about it, then shrugged. "No, why should I? You're clearly ridiculously talented." Sweetie smiled. It was like a ray of light piercing the clouds. Ashish felt his dormant heart spark just a bit. "I do have another question, though," he said. "Why'd you ask me to come here and do this? Besides wanting to show me up as the clearly inferior runner, I mean." He grinned to show he didn't take it personally. "I asked you here because I heard my mom talking to yours about how..." She looked down at her feet and then back at him. The way her jaw was set, Ashish knew she was trying to be brave as she said the rest. "About how I'm too fat to date you." Ashish winced at the word. "Hey, don't call yourself that." Sweetie looked at him frankly. "Why not? It doesn't bother me." She paused, considering her next words. "What does hurt is that my own mom thinks it's a reason I couldn't date someone like you. But the word itself doesn't bother me." "Really?" She shrugged. "Sure. I mean, the word fat isn't inherently bad or gross. It's people who've made it that way. Fat is just the opposite of thin, and no one flinches at that one. So to me, fat is just another word that describes me, like brown or girl or athlete." And that's the end of that excerpt. Thanks for listening. I guess if you have questions, please type them in the chat as usual. But I think that for me, the reason I wrote the book, I often get the question, why did you write the book? And like I said, I feel like YA fiction has a lot of great representation with body positive books like Dumplin' by Julie Murphy is another great one. I just wanted to write one that had a little bit more intersectionality as far as ethnicity and body positivity, because coming from a South Asian community, I'm Indian American, and I feel like there's so much more to be plumbed with how different cultures experience and respond to fatness. And I was really interested in kind of portraying what I've seen within my own community, which can be really toxic, especially when it comes to women's bodies. And, you know, if they differ in any way from what's considered conventionally attractive. And I had my own personal experience with this because even though I'm thin now, I have been fat at various points in my life. And it was always very interesting, the kind of messages that I got when I was fat versus when I've been thin, whether from my own community or even outside of it, how people kind of responded to me and made a lot of assumptions about me depending on how I looked on the outside, which I really wanted to explore as well. So we have our first question. What inspired the romance aspects? I don't know. I think for me, writing romance is really kind of an escape into, you know, a happy place where everything works out. It's like a guaranteed happily ever after, which I love. And for this, I really wanted to pair this fat athlete who's very confident with someone who never dates girls like her. Like Ashish is very, very typical player, and he's had his heart broken when we start this book. But before that, he only dated girls who looked like models in magazines. And so for him to kind of challenge his notions of beauty and to date someone who he would never have dated was a really fun challenge for him as like an emotional growth arc for his character. What is Sweetie's given name? Sweetie's name is Sweetie. That's not a nickname. A lot of Indian people tend to name their kids names like mine, but sometimes you also get like really fun names like Dimple, which was in my first book, and Twinkle, who was in my second book, and Sweetie, who's in my third. So yeah, I just decided to go with that rom-com flavor for this one too. Were you writing full-time? How long was the process for you? I do write full-time. I actually still, I have kept, and so I'm also a therapist, and I've kept my practice to a very, very part-time level because I tried to write full-time and I realized I'm just a person who cannot do that. I tend to get into my head too much and my world kind of closes in, and I get very obsessed with writing and nothing else, and I realized I needed to get out and do other things. So very, very part-time, I also do that. But the process for me, I generally do a first draft in about 2.5 to 3 months, and then editing takes a lot longer for me because I much prefer to draft. If I could just write first drafts for the rest of my life, that's what I would do. But so it probably took me a total of like 7 or 8 months from start to finish. Do you have a real life inspiration for the male character? No, I didn't have a real life inspiration. Funnily enough, this male character was really pushed me out of my comfort zone. He came to me in the first book, When Dimple Met Rishi. So this is kind of a companion novel to the first book. And he came to me as like Rishi's younger brother in that book. And he had this big personality that I wasn't expecting. He was supposed to be kind of one of those throwaway characters who comes in and then leaves and you never see him again. And I just ended up loving his character. And when that book came out, I got a lot of questions from readers about, will you write his story? So when my publisher approached me about writing the companion novel, I was like, yeah, I think I should write Ashish's story. And it was very challenging because he's probably the character who is least like me that I've written. I'm definitely not a player jock. I don't know if you guys can tell, but it was very hard to write a character like that, but I'm grateful for the experience because it helped me grow as a reader. And I'm going to stop there because we're going to do questions anyway at the end. So thank you everybody for listening. And yeah, I'm going to mute myself.
Thank you. Thank you, Sandhya. That was so great. Thanks so much. So as she just said, we'd now like to open it up to questions for any of the authors that you've heard this evening. So we'll do that now.
I have a question. It can be for anyone. I just always find it interesting to learn about how people got into writing in the first place. So if anyone wants to answer that.
I'll answer. This is Leah, and I got into writing because I was living in New York City as an actor, and which meant that I pretty much just sat around waiting for the phone to ring because I wasn't getting a whole lot of acting work. And I knew that I had a creative voice that I wanted to use. And somebody gave me a some great advice. They said, hey, if you're unhappy, look at the evidence of your life and do something with it. And I said, okay, I'm not getting enough acting work. And I'm just, I had a part-time job that paid my bills. And the rest of the time I was sitting in Brooklyn coffee shops, and I looked around and everybody around me was writing. And I thought, I can just sit here in a coffee shop and write and get my creative voice out. And so I kind of stumbled into writing because I wasn't getting any acting work. And I discovered that I just loved writing. And once I finished a book, I realized how much sense it made because I was always such an avid reader growing up. So I didn't start writing until I was in my 30s, but once I did, it just seemed to make so much sense for everything that I enjoyed growing up as a kid, which was reading books.
Thank you. Other questions?
Jim McComb asked, in Merged, was there a romantic aspect between the two characters or within the book? And yes, very purposely, there was a romantic triangle. The main character, Lake, sort of has to choose between Orphan, who has a carefree, sees the world in colors kind of point of view, the guy that she, was always told herself that that's not the guy for me. And then Stryker, who's the Nobel for Peace, and he's tall and handsome and always in charge. He's just perfect. And she's what she always envisioned for herself. And she has to learn how to really listen to her feelings when she's around these two guys and see how she feels as opposed to what her brain is telling her to do. And yes, there is quite a romantic element.
Thank you for that. And I meant to, I apologize. If another one of the finalists wants to respond to the question about how did you get into writing, we'd love to hear that. So I don't know, Laura, do you have a response to that? I'll put you on the spot.
I do have a response for that, Denise.
Yes.
So yeah, I loved reading as a kid. I always had my nose buried in a book. And when I was a teenager, I started really seriously trying to write my first book. And I was pretty secretive about it because, this was my sole passion, and I was making myself so vulnerable by writing. And so for many years, I didn't really share my stories in progress with other people because I was terrified. And I decided to get a master's degree in anthropology. I had never really met any writers before. I didn't have any real life role models. This was before you could friend authors on Instagram or Facebook or whatever. So I just kind of knew academia, and I kind of went along. And then I was in Arizona, University of Arizona, getting my master's degree. And I would get up at 5 in the morning and work on my book, What the Moon Saw. And that was my first book I tried writing, or not the first book I tried writing, but the first book that I was really serious about. And I realized that, that 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., when I was writing that book, that's when I felt most alive and happiest. And then the rest of the day I would do my graduate school stuff. And so when I finished my master's, it came time to decide, am I going to keep going for my PhD or not? And I just really had to reflect, what do I want to do with my life? What makes me feel alive? What gives me real joy? And it was writing, it was creative writing. So I decided to piece together a bunch of part-time jobs and give this book a try. And it took me about 5 years, but I finished it and I got it published. And so I feel really fortunate to be kind of living out my dream.
Wow, thanks, Laura. That was terrific. Anybody else? David?
Sure, I can jump in a little bit. So I too was in academia. I'm still a professor at Metro State University, and I just kind of got tired of writing little articles that maybe 20 people read, and I just didn't feel like I had much impact. And so, like you, I've always been obsessed by literature, and so I started writing seriously and just ran with it. Now, the great thing is what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have a political impact as well. So Winter Counts deals with the Major Crimes Act. So I know I'm not nominated for this book. It's not even out yet. But the book is about the Major Crimes Act, which is a terrible thing on Native American reservations. Crimes are committed, and we have no authority to punish people. We have to send a criminal offender off to the FBI. But they are declining to prosecute about 75% of all violent criminals. So rapists, child molesters, murderers walk the streets of our reservations. And what has sprung up is a private class of vigilantes. You can hire somebody to beat the tar out of somebody maybe who hurt your sister or your mother. And a lot of people don't know about this. So I could write a little academic study that 8 people would read, but this book is about that. But I also just love writing as well, so much like Laura said. It's my life's passion now, and it's tough for me to go back and write my academic books. But anyway, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, David. A message just popped up. That's a really great question for, again, whoever wants to write it. What made you choose middle grade and young adult fiction? Here come the glasses. I can't. And do you still read a lot of juvenile and YA? How do you keep with the tone of contemporary tweens and teens? So there's a few questions mixed in there. So maybe if that attracts you as a responder, maybe you could just choose one and let us know your thoughts. Anyone want to jump in?
I will.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Our first book that did not get published was more of a contemporary women's fiction. And, it was fun reading it, but they always say your first book is like the history of your life. And, it was about the woman who worked in corporate America, got laid off and had to find a meaning for life. And, so we wrote that one, didn't get published. And so then we decided, well, let's really talk about what's important to us and why we want to write. And we thought about all the books that made an influence in our life. And we looked at our bookshelves and we said, wow, we really like the middle grade and young adult genre, because those are the books that made a difference to us when we grew up. And we want to also influence kids and have messages without being preachy through the books. And we think that's one of the places and age groups that you can still reach them and make a difference.
And even today, I can't wait to reread Fever and Moon Over Manifest. I barely read adult fiction anymore.
Yeah. Someone else want to respond to that question? Leah?
I actually did not know that I was a middle grade author until I tried pretty much writing in every other genre, and I wasn't very good at it. And so when I first wrote my debut novel, The Cryptid Catcher, I actually wrote it as an adult novel. I was an actor, I wasn't a writer, I was just writing for fun to use my creative voice. So I initially wrote the story as an adult book about a Delta Force soldier traveling the world looking for dragons. And I thought it was amazing. And I had enough of a humorous voice that I got a literary agent from that book. But he said, Leah, this is not for adults. Nobody's going to read this. Why don't you write, can you change it to young adult for 13 to 18-year-olds? And I was like, sure, I don't know what that is. So I read a bunch of young adult novels and basically turned it into a story about a 16-year-old boy looking for dragons while wishing he had a girlfriend. And it was terrible. It was just awful. And my agent was like, he's like, why don't you try middle grade? Can you try middle grade? And I was like, sure, I don't know what that is. And so I read a bunch of middle grade and I turned it into a 13-year-old boy traveling the world looking for cryptids. And it just naturally fit my natural storytelling voice. So I did not know I was a middle grade author. I had to go through all the other genres before I discovered where I naturally fit.
That's such a great journey, and I think you've shared with, at least with me or others, with, and I love that, because one thing for me is it's so powerful is that you didn't give up. You kept being open to hearing a possibility and going in that direction and learning about it. So good for you.
And Denise, I'll just kind of add, for me, I have a similar kind of motivation for writing for middle grade and young adult, and that the books that affected my worldview and affected my life the most were the ones that I read at that age. And one of the biggest delights of being an author for this age group, or these age groups, is getting reader mail from young fans. And you can really feel the energy that comes through in their emails, and you can really feel like, wow, this did affect them in a really, really deep way. And I think that's something just magical about writing for this age group, and it makes me feel extra grateful for deciding to become an author, because that was something I didn't really anticipate when I kind of first took that leap into being a writer.
Thank you. That's terrific. I loved hearing about that. Let's see. Let me see what we have up here. How did your editors best play a role in helping you develop your work? Does anyone have an example of something where the editor really helped them in a particular scene or with a particular character?
I can say for, sorry to blab again, but real quick, Tree of Dreams, the end of my editor was like, I love the book, I just don't know about the end. And I was like, the end? And I wasn't really sure, like, what specific part of the end. But in the original version, the end was kind of predictable. I mean, it was kind of like she got what she wanted. And my editor was like, maybe there's some other possibilities. And so she really opened my mind to exploring what would be a satisfying ending that maybe nobody really saw coming, but yet once you read it, you think, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So my editor helped me figure that out.
And I don't want to spoil anything, but just on that, if you don't mind, was that all your editor said, and then you came up with that sort of more surprising ending, or was there some back and forth?
I would have to go look at the email documentation.
Okay, I was just curious.
Remember, I mean, I think there was some back and forth. Yeah, I think there must have been some back and forth. Yeah.
Sandhya, do you have anything on brainstorm or anything with your editors sort of improving your writing or helping you with a particular spot in the book?
Yeah, I mean, so many. I think without my editor, I would be completely lost. But in this book specifically, I remember, from the excerpt, you guys might have gotten that Sweetie was she has a very complicated relationship with her mother. And this was a relationship I really wanted to be careful with, because her mom's not just an evil villainess. She's kind of someone who's very flawed and has her own reasons for being afraid for Sweetie and wanting her to conform and kind of become this thin girl. She thinks your life would be so much easier if you were thin. And so I wanted to walk that really fine line. And so that was one place where my editor helped me a lot, was building her as this gray person, and where things didn't, I mean, it is a romantic comedy, so you want that happy ending, but you also don't want to trivialize what damage, parents can do to kids when they kind of talk to them and body shame and stuff like that. So that was one area where it took a lot of nuance and a really fine hand, and my editor helped me a lot.
That's great. And that's a really good example, because like you said, that fine line with creating a character who is flawed, but not necessarily evil, as it were. So that's terrific. I am just going to touch base with Josephine, because I'm not sure about our timing. So I didn't know.
I think that's great.
We're good. Okay.
And Thank you, Denise, so much for emceeing for us, for
Sure.
all of you for helping us figure this out together, for your patience. I have a list here for what I'm going to get sent to my kids I can't see for Easter. I was picking out which one of my grandkids for your book. So I'm really looking forward to their responses to those two. I want to just thank everyone, the staff. Sandy Tucker's on with our staff, our executive director's on. I've seen board members on both feeds. Everybody's been super helpful. Outskirts Press, Colorado Sun. And if you do, anybody listening reaches out to Outskirts Press or Colorado Sun, let them know that you heard about them and you're reaching out to them because of their support for the Colorado Center for the Book. That would be terrific to give them that feedback. And then you'll support a lot of local businesses by ordering from the Book Bar, who's got the stock lined up for Colorado Book Awards readings. And thanks to all the judges who are currently at work and the selectors and volunteers. And thank you all who joined us, who stayed in and logged in today to support Colorado writers. We will get this on our Facebook page live. We've got the recording in 2 places, and we'll get it up on our website, our YouTube channel, and just give this, we're free from time, right, and geography now, so more people can access Colorado writers. So I'll lift it up to the national network as well. Our next finalist reading will be the general fiction, literary fiction, and poetry next Friday on April 17th at 7 p.m. And winners will be announced later this spring. And stay tuned to our website and social. We're on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook for news about the celebration. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.